Okay, let's dig into this. Have you ever felt like your AI assistant, maybe for coding, gets a bit, well, sluggish towards the end of the day?
Yeah, like it just doesn't quite nail the complex stuff later on.
Exactly. You ask for complex code using maybe chain of thought reasoning where it explains its steps, and it just seems to stumble more. And
Hmm.
you're definitely not alone. We're seeing reports that large language models seem to perform worse as the day wears on.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is that this isn't necessarily just about the servers getting overloaded. There's this really interesting idea. People are calling it the tired coder hypothesis.
Tired coder. Okay, tell me more.
The suggestion is that these AIs might be subtly mimicking human fatigue patterns they learn from their training data.
Wow.
Oh,
Okay, so our mission today is to really unpack that idea. We'll look at user reports, some academic work, and even, how our own brains work with daily rhythms.
sounds good.
So this tired coder hypothesis,
Yeah.
how would that actually work? Like, what's the mechanism?
Well, the thinking is it's sort of a chain reaction. An application, maybe ChatGPT or an API call, sends the current time along with the request.
Okay, yeah, that happens, right?
Right. And the LLM, based on all the timestamp data it trained on, might subtly change its response. The hypothesis connects this to, well, actual tired coders.
You mean like people coding late at night?
Exactly. Maybe the code checked into GitHub at 3 a.m. or questions asked on Stack Overflow then statistically has more errors, or maybe it's just terser,
Okay.
less well documented. So the LLM sees a late night timestamp and, without being told to, sort of emulates that slightly more error-prone or lazy style it saw in the data. It adopts a tired persona implicitly.
That's a pretty wild idea. But, I mean, shouldn't we consider simpler explanations first? Like the machines themselves?
Absolutely, that's a critical point. What else could be going on? The biggest alternative is simply the machine, the cloud infrastructure.
Because running these huge models
It
in
is
the middle.
insanely expensive, yeah. So providers, cloud companies have a huge economic incentive to manage those resources carefully.
So things like throttling requests during peak hours.
Right, or dynamically shifting resources around, maybe even power management stuff that affects performance. And peak usage often lines up with the afternoon or evening.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What about the models themselves? Do they change over time?
Yes, that's another factor. We've definitely seen model instabilities. Academics call it model drift.
Drift, like performance just changes.
Yeah, sometimes degrades. There was a study showing GPT-4's ability to directly run generated code dropped massively, from like 52% down to 10% in just a few months. Sometimes it was tiny things, like extra formatting characters.
Wow.
And models can also just get lazy, maybe omitting parts of the answer or taking internal shortcuts that look like lower quality to us.
So infrastructure load, model drift, model laziness. Lots of factors before we get to tired AIs.
Precisely. But the tired coder idea is compelling because it draws that direct parallel to us, to humans.
Right. And we know our own performance isn't constant. That's where chronobiology comes in, right? Studying our daily rhythms.
Exactly. Our thinking ability, alertness, it all ebbs and flows based on our internal circadian clocks.
I definitely feel that zone of maximum vulnerability before my first coffee, like around 6 to 10 a.m., they say.
Yeah, alertness is lowest then. Peak thinking might be mid-morning or early afternoon. It's complex, though, even varies between larks and owls.
So the human analogy is strong. But how does the LLM even know what time it is to start potentially mimicking this?
Well, that first step, it's already happening. LLMs are often told the time. ChatGPT gets the date and time in a hidden prompt.
The system prompt.
Right. And developers using APIs, they often send the current time with every single request programmatically.
So the timestamp is there. And if the training data has those statistical patterns of tired code and certain times,
Then the timestamp acts like a subtle cue. The model sees 2 a.m. and might, just might, lean towards the patterns it learned from 2 a.m. human inputs, maybe slightly buggier, maybe shorter.
okay, so how do we test this? How do we isolate just the effect of the timestamp away from server load and all that?
We need a carefully controlled experiment. The key is to remove those machine factors.
How?
You'd run your own LLM, maybe an open source one, on your own controlled hardware. And you run the test during a really quiet real world time, say 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning UTC. Low global load.
Gotcha. So the actual time and load are constant and low.
Exactly. Then you give the LLM coding tasks, but you fake the timestamp in the prompt.
So you tell it it's 9 a.m. for one batch, 2 p.m. for another, 2 a.m. for a third, And maybe a control group with no time.
Precisely. Then you measure everything. Not just if the code works like using pass at K-metrics, but also those stylistic things. Is it lazier, more verbose, more formatting errors?
Okay, so what are the potential outcomes here? What does it mean for you, the listener?
Well, if the hypothesis holds up, if faking a late-night timestamp does make the AI perform worse or differently even on controlled hardware,
Then we need to be careful about sending timestamps, maybe strip them out unless needed, or tell the AI explicitly, be alert.
right, we'd need new prompt sanitization habits. But if the hypothesis is refuted, if the time makes no difference in this setup,
Then it really points back to the machine, the cloud provider's load management.
Okay.
We need more transparency from them.
definitely. And there's a third possibility. Maybe core correctness stays the same, but the style changes. That would be fascinating, showing how layered these models' behaviors are.
So next time your AI gives you a weird answer late at night,
Hmm.
maybe pause and wonder, is it the server load? Is it you? Or is the AI just, feeling a bit 2 a.m.?
It opens up fascinating questions. If they can pick up on tiredness patterns, could they pick up on seasonal mood changes in data? Other subtle human states reflected in time-stamped text.
Definitely something to mull over.
Huh.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive.